Hi, I'm Sammy and I'm going to walk you through this short presentation on ADHD, and we're going to explore how ADHD is relevant and prevalent for the early years. It's obviously a very short presentation and it's not everything that you need to know. It's just a dip and a dive in. So first up, we're going to talk about some key features of ADHD, and it's important to remember that this is a developmental disorder of self-control, and it affects the executive function of the brain, and symptoms arise from brain abnormalities. It's not children being naughty, for example. There is a research that shows that the brain abnormalities are the root cause of ADHD. And people with ADHD, their main problems are around attention span, impulse control, and activity level. Obviously a high activity level. And it's a real disorder and often a real obstacle for those with ADHD, children and adults. Let's have a look at some of the symptoms of inattention, which is one aspect of ADHD. So these are some of the things that we might see in relation to inattention. Fails to pay close attention to details, makes careless mistakes, maybe with things that other people would expect them not to make mistakes with, or mistakes that are unusual for their level of experience or age and stage of development. Has difficulty maintaining attention in tasks or in play. Doesn't necessarily seem to listen when spoken to directly. Doesn't always follow directions. Could be that they fail to complete schoolwork at an older age, or chores or things that they've been asked to do. Has difficulty organising tasks or activities. Avoids or dislike tasks that require sustained mental effort. Lose track of things, or where things are, or where they are in a process, for example, and physically loses things or information that is necessary for tasks or activities. In older people that are in the workplace, for example, there might be a specific task that they're working on and they've been given information over a period of time that they need to do that task, but they can't find it. It's gone, it's lost, it's not tracked properly. People with ADHD are often easily distracted and can be forgetful even in daily activities. And what I've done on the next slide is just highlight some things that I think are really specific for children. Obviously, those things that we just said also can be applied for children as well, but some of these things are even more specific. So we might be looking at frequent daydreams, for example, following instructions and shifting from task to task within school or an early years provision. Issues in terms of staying at one activity, not seeming to listen to when spoken to, and avoiding tasks in an early years setting or in a school that require a lot of focus, just avoiding those tasks. Let's look at the symptoms then of hyperactivity. So we've looked at attention deficit. Let's look at the things that relate to hyperactivity, the H part. So fidgets with hands or feet, squirms, moves around in a seat. If they're in a classroom setting, will leave the seat often, and in other situations where remaining seating, for example at meal times, is expected, they may leave their seat. Runs or climbs excessively, even when inappropriate. Has difficulty playing or engaging in leisure activities quietly in the book area, in the reading corner. very difficult to be quiet in those kind of spaces. Always on the go, maybe acts as if they're driven by a motor, supercharged battery, the Duracell kid, often can talk excessively, and can exhibit feelings of restlessness as well, as they get older. And here are some that I highlighted that I think are, again, more specific to children: constant motion, constant fidgeting, excessive physical movement, inability or unable to wait their turn, often acting without thinking, interrupting conversations, trouble listening, always on the go. And as I said in the last slide, having a hard time doing those quiet activities. And we talked about impulsivity as well being an issue. And here are some of the symptoms of that: blurting out answers even before the question has been asked or is complete. Has difficulty waiting in turn. Interrupts or intrudes on others, for example, butts into conversations or games. And there's 3 types of ADHD that we should at least be aware of. Inattentive type, and this is where the clinical staff would identify at least 6 symptoms of inattention. Hyperactive impulsive type, where you have at least 6 symptoms of hyperactivity or impulsivity. And combined, which essentially is both of those. And again, you'd be looking for at least 6 symptoms or indicators of those. And what I want to say is that ADHD is a lifetime course. It's not something that children will just experience in childhood or adolescence, but it is a lifetime journey. And on this next slide, we're going to just look at some of the things that, are relevant to, more prevalent in children, and some of the ways that we might see that in adulthood. So in children, we might see a difficulty in sustaining attention. We see that in adulthood with having difficulties in meetings, in reading, in paperwork, where they're required to sustain attention. In children, we might see this example of not listening, no follow through, can't organise, or losing important items. In adulthood, we might see things like paralysing procrastination, doing something else, and doing something else, and doing something else, so they don't need to do the tasks that they need to do. That is procrastination. And all of us do that to some extent with things that we don't want to do. We find ways of putting them off. If we need to sit at home and write a paper, suddenly the washing up becomes very attractive. But for those with ADHD, often that procrastination is paralysing. It means they never get to the tasks or do the things that they really need to do. And that can make them slow and ineffective, poor time management and disorganised. And this is really in the inattention domain. Let's look at the hyperactivity or impulsivity domain. And again, on the left-hand side there, we can see how it relates to children, and on the right-hand side, how it might relate to adults. So for children, we talked about squirming, fidgeting, can't stay seated, can't wait their turn, excessive running, climbing, can't play quietly, on the go, as if they're driven by a motor, excessive talking, blurting out answers, intrudes or interrupts. And for adults, we see this manifesting as inefficiencies at work, can't sit through meetings, can't wait in line, maybe they drive too fast. Often we might see ADHD individuals reflecting that in their job choices. So selecting very active jobs where they can be on the go. Can't tolerate frustration, again, excessive talking, sometimes making inappropriate comments, coming from not thinking before you speak, and interrupting others. So how prevalent is ADHD? Well, interestingly, Israel has the highest number of diagnosis of ADHD than anywhere else in the world. And Israeli children, the prevalence is at 14.4%. In other countries, it's usually more around 11%. And boys are 3 times more likely to have an ADHD diagnosis than girls. And let's just see what the impact, as I said, lifelong, what might the impact of ADHD look like. So in childhood, we might see children injuring themselves frequently, and that could manifest in terms of low self-esteem. As we're moving into adolescence, there could be academic limitations, and their relationships with their peers or family members could become impaired or strained. As we enter into kind of young adults or upper end of teenage years, we might see motor vehicle accidents, and that might come from driving too fast, not paying attention, etc. And we start to see smoking and substance abuse as well. And as we move into adulthood, there can be on-the-job problems, occupational problems, in the workplace, and sometimes legal problems as well. Let's look at what the developmental impact of ADHD could look like. So in preschool, we might see that in terms of behavioural disturbance. For school-aged children, that could extend to academic problems, social interactions, and that could unpack to self-esteem issues as well. And in adolescence, those things, continue and extend. We might see difficulties with social interactions with peers becoming more obvious, and that can lead to legal issues, smoking, injury, etc. College age or young adults, academic failures, we talked about in the last slide, moving into substance abuse, and potentially, occupational difficulties, and in adulthood that could translate to occupational failures, and significant relationship problems, intimacy problems as well. And I do want to stress that this is developmental impact of untreated, ADHD. Obviously, in the slides that we're going to come to in a few minutes, there are ways to treat and work with an ADHD diagnosis to not fall into these issues. And obviously not everyone with ADHD experiences all of these issues either. I think that's important to say. So we're just going to look at a bit of science now, and we're going to dip into the preorbital frontal cortex, and functional magnetic imaging research has revealed that the preorbital frontal cortex does actually function differently in individuals that have ADHD, and this is what the preorbital frontal cortex is kind of responsible for. It's to do with executive functioning, which links to planning, sequencing, organising, self-control, and other executive functions as well, which we'll look at on the next slide. And you probably know from experience of interacting with people that have ADHD is these are exactly the kinds of things that individuals with ADHD will find difficult and have problems with and challenges with. So what are the other executive functions? It's a set of mental processes that help connect past experiences, i.e. things that you've learned through experience, with present actions. Yes. The executive function is essentially the conductor of the brain, enabling independent, purposeful, and goal-directed behaviour to exist. And it plays a crucial part in learning and the ability to self-regulate behaviour. Things like keeping track of time, ideas, being able to reflect on work. And those that have ADHD will find difficulties and challenges in doing those things. So here are some of the skills, some of them we've already mentioned, but I wanted to present a kind of fuller list of skills that are associated with the executive function, and therefore things that people with ADHD will find challenging. So setting goals, planning, strategizing, sequencing, prioritizing, initiating, self-monitoring, managing own time and space, emotional control, paying attention, pacing, shifting, remembering, and attention to detail. So these are some of the ways that ADHD can be managed. So first of all, through a medical approach. Ritalin is the most widely prescribed medication for ADHD. That is a stimulant, but there's also non-stimulant drugs as well. Psychotherapy is another way that people with ADHD can be treated and supported. And family therapy and guidance, things like supporting how the household is managed, supporting parenting through family therapy and guidance, and supporting stress management for the person with ADHD, but also those around them. And looking at classroom management as well for those that are in an early years setting or a school environment, getting support for the professionals that are working in an educational context with someone with ADHD. There's two other things that I want to just talk about before we finish this kind of mini presentation. One is nutrition and ADHD, and the other is access to the outside. So nutrition and ADHD. Protein and omega-3 fatty acids are important for ADHD, as well as iron and magnesium. So it's important that those with ADHD eat a high protein diet, eat more omega-3 fatty acids, eat complex carbs at night, as part of an evening meal. This may aid in sleep, and eat fewer simple carbohydrates with high sugars. And let's look at exercise and outside play, as I mentioned earlier. Access to outside play and exercise can support those with ADHD as a therapy, but it's not really a therapy, it's just they need more access to exercise and outside play, and it can help in some of the symptoms or indicators that we see, such as attention and details and sitting and all of those kind of things. So these are the key kind of positive outcomes that can come from exercise and outside play. So improved attention can have a calming effect, enhanced executive function, positive impact, as I already said, on the symptoms, and healthy physical and mental development. Now, I think that exercise and outside play is so important for people, and especially children with ADHD, that I have actually dedicated an entire slide to each one of these things. So let's dive in and go through those. So first of all, improved attention. Spending time in nature and engaging in physical activities can help improve attention and focus in children with ADHD. And studies have found that children with ADHD were much more attentive after spending time in outdoor activities. Go and climb trees, run around, jump in water, and be as active as possible in the outdoors. A calming effect. The natural environment and outdoor play can have a real calming effect on children with ADHD. Gentle breezes, natural sounds, open spaces can all help reduce stress and anxiety and help bring a sense of calmness. Enhanced executive function. Exercise has been shown to increase activity in parts of the brain related to behaviour and attention, which can help improve children's executive function, which is an area where children with ADHD often struggle. So by exercising these parts of the brain through access to the outdoors and being active helps them with things like focus and all of that long list of things that we looked at in relation to executive function. And the outdoors can have a positive impact on symptoms. Regular physical activity has been linked to a decrease in the severity of ADHD symptoms, including improved focus and improved mood. Healthy physical and mental development is another area that I spoke about, and exercise is vital for children's healthy physical and mental development. It can help them stay at a healthy weight, improve self-confidence, and reduce the risks of other health-related conditions as well. So let's move on then to my final slide, which is my concluding comments, and it's just a kind of summary of some of the key issues. That it is a developmental disorder that affects the executive functions of individuals. The key issues are around attention span, impulse control, and activity level. ADHD can affect up to 1 in every 7 children. Things like a good diet and an active lifestyle, spending time in the outdoors, can support. And from 6 years old, there are medication options, but we wouldn't really advise those in the early years. I hope that's been useful and given you some insight into ADHD and its relevance in the early years and in childhood.